Hello everyone, this is the video for NISM-Series-V-A Mutual Fund Distribution Certification Examination. To take the NISM examination, you have to register at the site www.nism.ac.in. This examination enhances the quality of sales, distribution and related support services in the mutual fund industry. The examination consists of 100 questions of 1 mark each and should be completed in 2 hours. The passing score for examination is 50%. There shall be no negative marking. .nism.ac.in. This examination enhances the quality of sales, distribution and related support services in the mutual fund industry. The examination consists of 100 questions of 1 mark each and should be completed in 2 hours. The passing score for examination is 50%. There shall be no negative marking. The syllabus covers 12 chapters. By learning these 12 chapters through the videos, the candidate will know the basics of mutual funds, their role and structure, different kinds of mutual fund schemes and their features. They will be able to understand how mutual funds are distributed in the marketplace, how schemes are to be evaluated, and how suitable products and services can be recommended to investors and prospective investors in the market. They get oriented to the legalities, accounting, valuation, and taxation aspects underlying mutual funds and their distribution. Let us start with chapter number 1. Investment landscape. Now the question arises that why the person should invest in the mutual funds. The simple answer is that to achieve their goals. This is the one way how the person can achieve their goal. Let us see certain examples that the school going children have their dream to become doctor, engineer, space scientist, etc. So the parents want to support their children pursue their dream. For that purpose, they need to assign some money at present, so in future those money can be used for their education. Now a person is working in the multinational company, but the company is not providing him the pension. So to live a comfortable life, he has to invest in such type of mutual funds where he can enjoy his life in the future. One example is that some people want to buy their house in the near future, their car. So they require a lot of money. So they have to invest in certain mutual funds to achieve their goal. One more example. Suppose a person is retiring and he gets a lump sum money after the retirement. Now he wants the regular income after the retirement so he can live the comfortable life. So he or she who is retiring and getting a lump sum money can invest in certain type of mutual funds where there will be regular income of money generated. So different people have different requirements, and these requirements are known as the financial objectives. When we assign amounts and timelines to these objectives, we convert this into financial goals. There are various examples of such financial goals. Some are common, some are uncommon. Among the most common are funding a child's education, the cost of the marriage of one's son or daughter, funding the lifestyle in the retirement, buying a vehicle, buying or renovating one's house, taking a big vacation. At the same time, there could be some not so common ones like starting one's own business or taking a sabbatical from work and fund one's higher education. Goal setting is a very important exercise while planning for investments. The first step in goal setting is to identify these events in life. Some of these are desirable and can be planned, whereas some others which may be undesirable may spring up as surprises. Those events with a potential negative outcome would be undesirable. Some of the examples of the same are the death of a family member, hospitalization, accident, theft, fire, etc. One cannot plan to fund the expenses associated with such events through investments, though we can create an emergency fund using some savings and investments products. Apart from the emergency fund, one may buy insurance policies to cover the risk of such events. After identifying the events, one needs to assign priorities. Which of these are more important than the others? Retirement or children's education fall into the responsibilities category, whereas grand vacation may be a good to have goal. Having said that, it is only the individual and the family that can decide which is which. A financial advisor may only guide and help one take an appropriate decision. At the time, the role of an intermediary would be very important. After that, one needs to assign a timeline as well as the amount of funding required at the time of such events. Take for example, if someone is planning to buy a house, one needs to decide the type of the house one wants as well as the location. These inputs would help arrive at approximate cost. After that, one needs to decide by when one would like to buy this. Both of the timeline and amount are critical for one to be able to plan to achieve the goal. Such an exercise allows one to classify the goals in terms of timeline. Are the goals in the near term or far in the future? The next step would be to assign amounts to the financial goals. The cost of education has been going up at very fast pace over the last few decades. Similar in the case of cost of healthcare, which can have a big impact on the expenses during the retirement years. Such a rise in the cost of goods is called inflation. It applies to many other areas of personal finance. This is known as inflation with respect to the goal value. Inflation adjustment for the goal values is critical, without which the entire planning can go haywire. For example, assume that the cost of the higher education is rupees 50 lakhs in today's price. If the inflation in the college fees is expected to be 8% per annum, parents need to provide for rupees 1 crore 7 lakhs 94,625 in 10 years approximately. Another example, if the inflation is 6% per annum, the household expenses would be higher a year later in comparison to today's cost of living. If a family's monthly expenses are rupees 30,000 currently, they would be spending rupees 31,800 next year if the inflation is 6%. This does not look like much, but if the inflation stays at the same level, this family's monthly expenses would be roughly rupees 53,725 after 10 years and rupees 96,214 after 20 years. Before taking a look at various investment options available for an investor, they should know the difference between the terms savings or investments. Do the two words saving and investment mean the same thing, or are they different words? If these are different things, which is better, saving or investing? The word saving originates from the same root as safe. The safety of money is of critical importance here, whereas when one invests money, the primary objective typically is to earn the profits. The important point to note here is that there is a trade-off between risk and return. The other difference is evident from the dictionary definition of saving: reduction in the amount of money used. This definition refers to reducing consumption so that some money is saved. It is this saved money that can be invested. In other words, saving and investing are not to be considered as two completely different things, but two steps of the same process. In order to invest money, one needs to save first. Thus, saving precedes investing. Factors to evaluate investments. Now, when you start any of your investment, there are certain factors you have to go through. The three most important factors to evaluate investments are safety, liquidity, and returns. Let us talk about safety. This begins with the safety of capital invested. For example, fixed deposits. Here, the capital invested is safe, but in the matter of equity, the capital may go up or down. In order to understand the safety of an investment, it is important to understand the risk involved. Then comes liquidity. How easily can one liquidate the investment and convert into cash? For example, suppose a flat is there. Can you convert into cash easily? No. The degree of ease is different across different categories and even within the categories. The same could be different across products. Sometimes the nature of the product could be such that selling it is difficult, whereas sometimes there could be some operational features. Example, a lock-in for a certain period, after which one may be able to liquidate the investment, or a penalty for an early exit. For example, you can liquidate the shares easily and convert into cash, but there are certain mutual fund schemes where there is a lock-in period. There, the liquidity is not that easy. While such a penalty does not hamper liquidity, it only lowers the investment returns. Another aspect that one may also want to look at is divisibility. Is it possible to liquidate part of the investment, or is it necessary to sell the whole thing? Again, the real estate, you cannot sell half. You have to sell fully. In case of the mutual fund, you can redeem part of your investments and other part you can continue for the further investments. Now let us talk about returns. According to the definition of investments, the major purpose is to get some returns from investment. Such returns may be in the form of regular or periodic income, also known as current income, and capital appreciation or capital gains. The current income is receivable periodically without having to sell the investment, for example, rent of the flats or any commercial properties. Whereas the capital gains can be realized only when one sells the investments. Now, this is the example of the mutual fund. Unless and until you don't redeem the mutual fund units, there is no capital gain considered. The exit charges or penalty would bring down the returns as seen earlier. Now see, if you withdraw the fixed deposit before the maturity period, then you have to pay some penalty. So it lowers your returns. Hence, whenever there are any charges for early withdrawals, the same must be considered as a trade-off between liquidity and returns. Let us talk about the convenience in relation to the mutual fund investment. With respect to the investing, taking the money out fully or partially, as well as the investor's ability to conveniently check the value of the investment as well as to receive the income. Then comes ticket size. What is the minimum amount required for the investment? This is the first question of any investor. There are some avenues where an investor can start investing amount as small as rupees 50 or rupees 100, whereas some require more than rupees 1 lakh and sometimes more than rupees 1 crore. This becomes an important factor while taking a decision about the selection of investment options. Flexibility of income is one more factor that should be taken into consideration while investment. Now there are certain products like fixed deposits, debt fund, equity fund, hybrid fund. So accordingly there are different taxations on different products. At that time there could be some products that may offer low tax on investment returns only if the investor stays invested for a certain time or till the maturity of the product. In other words, if the investor sells the investment before maturity or certain minimum period, the minimum returns may be taxable. Tax deduction. This is one more factor to be considered during the investment. Now see, there are certain products like ELSS in mutual fund, PPF, where the tax deduction is available. However, where the tax deduction is available, the product may have a lock-in period of certain years. Once again, there is a trade-off between liquidity and tax deduction. Different asset classes. There are 4 broad asset categories or asset classes. They are real estate, commodities, equity, and fixed income. Let us talk about the real estate. It is considered as the most important and popular among all the asset classes. You might be aware that our parents and forefathers invest in land. They considered as the safest investment of all. Now suppose if the individual purchases the real estate for self-occupation, then that should not be considered as the investment, because by selling the same they may have a negative impact on their lifestyle. Real estate could be further classified into various categories like residential real estate, land, commercial real estate, etc. There are certain traits of real estate. One of them is location. It is a very important factor impacting the performance of an investment in real estate. The location is very important. Suppose a person is buying a house in Mumbai, then the investment value is very high. Real estate is illiquid. You cannot sell it very easily and convert into cash. It is not a divisible property. You cannot sell the half of the flat or a house and convert into cash. One can invest in physical real estate as well as in financial form. Nowadays there are certain mutual funds which are related with the real estate. In case of real estate, the transaction cost, etc., brokerage charges, registration charges, etc., are quite high. This would bring down the return on investment. The cost of maintenance of the property as well as any taxes payable must be adjusted before calculating the return on investment, something that many individual investors do not. These expenses are also quite high and cannot be ignored. This investment acquired or sold shall be accounted at transaction price, excluding all transaction costs such as brokerage, stamp duty, and any charge customarily included in the broker's contract note that are attributable to acquisition sale of investments. Commodities. This is another asset category that people at large are familiar with in various ways. On a regular basis, people consume many commodities. Example, agricultural commodities like spices, petroleum products such as petrol and diesel, or metals like gold and silver. However, it is not possible to invest in most of this, as many of these are either perishable and hence cannot be stored for a long, or storage of the same could take a lot of space, creating a different kind of difficulties. Though there are commodity derivatives available on many commodities, it may not be wise to call these investments for 2 reasons. First, these are leverage contracts, that is, one can take large exposure with a small of money, making it highly risky. And second, these are normally short-term contracts, whereas the investor's needs be for a longer periods. On the other hand, there are 2 commodities that many investors are quite familiar with and investment avenues, that is gold and silver. An investor in these commodities would have to count only on capital appreciation, since these do not generate any current income. Fixed income. When someone borrows money, one has to return the principal borrowed to the lender in the future. There could be also some interest payable on the amount borrowed. There are various forms of borrowing, some of which are through marketable instruments like bonds and debentures. There are many issuers of such papers, example companies, union government, state governments, municipal corporations, banks, financial institutions, public sector enterprises, etc. Many bonds pay regular interest, thus the investor can expect current income. Bonds are generally considered to be safer than equity. However, these are not totally free from risk. Bonds are classified into subcategories on the basis of the issuer type, that is, issued by the government or corporates, or on the basis of the maturity date. Short-term bonds ideal for liquidity needs, medium-term bonds and long-term bonds income generation needs. Equity. This is the owner's capital in a business. Someone who buys shares in a company becomes a part owner in the business. When one buys shares of a company through the secondary market, the share price could be high or low in comparison to the fair price. Historically, equity investing has generated returns in excess of inflation, which means the purchasing power of one's money has increased over the years. It has also delivered higher returns than other investment avenues most of the time, if one considers long-term investment periods. Since the base year of 1979, Sensex has grown from a level of 100 to around 66,000, that is July 2023. This is an appreciation of around 16% per annum. Apart from long-term capital appreciation, equity share owners may also receive dividends from the company. Such dividends are shared out of the profit that the company has generated from its business operations. If the company does really well, the dividends tend to grow over the years. There are similarities and differences between the various asset categories. Investments in equity and bonds can be done only in the financial forms, whereas one can buy the other two assets, real estate and commodities, either in financial or in physical form. Real estate and commodities differ from equity and bonds in another way too. For example, one may invest in residential property and give it on rent to generate income. This is an investment. At the same time, one may also buy a flat to live in for residential purposes. Such a self-occupied house may not be an investment. A similar logic may be applied to gold and silver by checking whether one has invested in the metal or bought the same for personal use. An investor in equity, real estate and commodities is an owner of the asset, whereas investors in bonds has lent money to someone. In such a case, the lender's receipt, be its interest payments or return of principal in amount invested, are agreed at the time of the issue of such instruments. One can also invest in shares of various companies listed outside India. This provides exposure to another currency. For example, an investor buying the shares of a company listed on the London Stock Exchange is exposed to the fortunes of the company, as well as the change in the exchange rate between the British pound and the Indian rupee. Similarly, one could also invest in bonds denominated in various currencies other than Indian rupee, and one could also buy real estate abroad. These are called international assets. Investment risk. To obtain a better understanding of the investment avenues, it is essential to understand the different kind of risk involved, like inflation risk, liquidity risk, credit risk, market risk and price risk, interest rate risk. Let us talk about the inflation risk. Inflation or price inflation is the general rise in the price of various commodities, products and services that we consume. For example, how much money would you need to buy the goods you can buy with rupees 10,000 today if the inflation is assumed at 8% per annum? After 5 years, it will be 14,693. After 10 years, it will be 21,589. After 20 years, it will be rupees 46,610. After 30 years, it will be 1,627 rupees. One may also look at the impact of inflation in another way. If one could buy 100 units of something with rupees 10,000 today, assuming inflation is 8% per annum, one would be able to buy only 68 units of same thing after 5 years and only 46 units after 10 years. This clearly shows the loss of purchasing power. In order to protect the purchasing power, the investment return should be at least as much as inflation. If the same is higher than inflation, the purchasing power increases. Whereas if one earns lower returns than inflation, the purchasing power drops. For example, if you earn an interest rate of 7% per annum on your fixed deposit when the inflation is at 8% per annum, it is obvious that the investing grows at so slower pace than the rise in prices. The returns on the investment without factoring inflation is known as the nominal rate. However, when this number is adjusted for inflation, one gets the real rate of return. Liquidity risk. Investments in fixed income assets are usually considered less risky than equity, but there are certain conditions attached in it. For example, of the fixed deposits, there are fixed deposits that you have to keep for the period of 5 years. Now, if you withdraw the money before the period of 5 years, then they charge the penalty like 1%, and this reduces your capital gain. So that is called liquidity risk. Another example is of PPF. There is a certain period, means for 15 years you cannot withdraw any money, and even after that there may be only partial liquidity. This risk is also very closely associated with real estate, where liquidity is very low and often it takes weeks or months to sell the investment. But in case of equity, you can sell the shares and convert into cash within 2 to 3 days. But the equity price go up and down periodically, so such investments are not appropriate for funding short-term liquidity needs. Then comes credit risk. For example, the bonds, investment in bonds, the issuer agrees to pay the interest and repay the principal as per an agreed schedule. There are three possibilities in such arrangements. First, the issuer honors all commitment in time, so there is no problem. You will get the interest in time. But in second, the issuer pays the dues but with some delay. And in third, the issuer does not pay principal and the interest at all. So this is called as credit risk, as the person is losing the money because of the default conditions of the company. So, the bonds issued by the government of their own country would be considered to be the safest for investors. Market risk and price risk. There are two types of risk to the security, that is market risk and price risk. Let us understand this through an example. When there is a possibility of country getting into a war-like situation, there is a widespread fear that this may impact the economy and companies within it. Due to such fear, it is quite possible that the price of all stocks, or at least a large number of stocks in the market, may witness a fall. This is a market-wide fall. On the other hand, when the sales of the company's product fall due to technological changes or the arrival of a better product, the company's share falls. For example, in auto industry, if certain parts are not available, then at that time the share value of certain auto companies may fall. This is an example of a company specific risk. There could be some industry specific factors which would impact all the firms within the same industry. This happened when the mobile phones started becoming popular. The pager industry vanished in less than a couple of decades. Next is interest rate risk. This risk affects the value of bonds, debt instruments more directly than stocks. Any reduction in interest rates will increase the value of the instrument and vice versa. The relationship between interest rates and bond prices is inverse. When the interest rates in the economy increase, the prices of the existing bonds decrease, since they continue to offer the old interest rate. For example, if a bond was issued at rupees 1000 for 1 year and it offered the interest rate of 8%, immediately after the bond was issued, the interest rate in the economy increased and the new bonds are now offering 8.5% interest. In such a case, the earlier bond becomes less attractive. If the investor who invested in that bond wants to sell, it can only be done at a discount. The reverse is also true. The interest rate risk varies for bonds with different maturities. Those with longer maturity would witness higher price fluctuation in comparison to those with shorter maturities. Such movement in bond prices on account of changes in interest are referred to as interest rate risk. This is a market-wide factor affecting the prices of all bonds. Risk measures and management strategies. Many of the risk cannot be eliminated, and the investor must take some of those in order to earn decent returns in one's investment portfolio. However, one needs to manage the risk that one is taking. One may consider the following strategies for management of the investment risk. First is avoid. One may avoid certain investment products if one does not want to take the respective risk. Many experts recommend that one should avoid the investment avenues that one does not understand. Then comes take a position to benefit from some event development. An investor can also take an investment position in anticipation of some developments in the market. Let us take an example here. A bond investor expects the interest rates to go down. In such a case, one may sell the short maturity bonds and invest in long maturity bonds. If the interest rate moves down, the investor's judgment would be rewarded handsomely. At the same time, if the judgment is wrong, there could be losses too. This is an example of managing the interest rate risk. Similarly, some investors manage their investment portfolios using such strategies across the multiple asset categories. Due to the amount of the skill required and the risk involved, such strategies are not recommended for a large number of investors. Then comes diversify. For a lay investor, a prudent approach would be to diversify across various investment options. This spreads the risk of loss, and thus the probability of losing everything can be significantly reduced through diversification. For example, a person investing only in the equity market will lose the money if the market goes down. So, it is prudent to diversify the portfolio, investing in all the categories of the investment like equity, bonds, commodities, etc. Apart from the risk discussed about, there are certain behavioral biases in the investment decision making. This is also one of the risks the investor must understand. However, this risk is not related to the investments but the role of emotions in decision making, or in other words, the irrational behavior of the investor towards management of money. Investors are driven by emotions and biases. The most dominant emotions are fear, greed, and hope. Some important biases are discussed. Availability heuristic. Most people rely on examples or experiences that come to mind immediately while analyzing any data, information, or options to choose from. In the investing world, this means that enough research is not undertaken for evaluating investment options. This leads to missing out the critical information, especially pertaining to various investment risks. So, you should have the enough data before investing in the mutual funds or equity. Then comes confirmation bias. Investors also suffer from confirmation bias. This is the tendency to look for additional information that confirms their already held beliefs or views. It also means that interpreting new information to confirm the views. In other words, investors decide first and then look for data to support their views. The downside is very similar to the previous one. Investors tend to miss out on many risks. Then comes herd mentality. Man is a social animal. Human beings love to be the part of group. While this behavior has helped our ancestors to survive in hostile situations and against powerful animals, this often works against the investor's interest in the financial markets. There are numerous examples where simply being against the herd has been the most profitable strategy. Then comes loss aversion. Loss aversion explains people's tendency to prefer avoiding losses to acquiring equivalent gains. It is better not to lose rupees 5,000 than to gain rupees 5,000. Such behavior often leads to people to stay away from the profitable opportunities due to the perception of the high risk. Even the risk could be very low. This was first identified by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Overconfidence. This bias refers to the person's overconfidence in one's ability to or judgment. This leads one to believe that one is far better than others at something, whereas the reality may be quite different. Under the spell of such a bias, one tends to lower the guards and take on risk without paper assessment. Recency bias. The impact of recent events on decision making can be very strong. This applies equally to positive and negative experiences. A bear market or a financial crisis leads people to prefer safe assets. Similarly, a bull market makes people allocate more than what is advised for risky assets. The recent experience overrides analysis in decision making. For example, a rise in the price of equities will make people think only about a further rise, which would lead to more investment being made in equities. This increases the risk. On the other hand, a fall in prices in an asset would make a people stay away thinking it would fall further, which could lead to a loss of opportunities. Behavior patterns. Behavior patterns. There are different types of people, and the factors that influence their lives also impact the manner in which they save or invest. The drive to save more or to be regular in investing often come from these personal factors. Behavioral tests are very useful in determining and knowing the kind of personality a person has, and this would include whether they are spenders or savers or investors. Interest of the investors. Many times, the financial and the investment decisions are not guided by the fact as to whether this investment is suitable for a person or not, but by the interest of the investor. This can lead to the construction of portfolios which are not suitable for specific people. For example, someone working in the information technology industry might just have technology stocks in their portfolio. This leads to the concentration of risk. Ethical standards. The presence of ethical principles in the dealing of individuals also has an impact as far as their investment behavior is concerned. Those people following ethical standards are more likely to pay attention to their investments and be disciplined because they tend to follow the norms. This is a big help when it comes to building long term wealth. Trying to take shortcuts might derail the entire investment process and set back the existing efforts. These are only some of the biases. This is not an exhaustive list. The negative effect of these biases is that the investor does not gather enough information to be able to identify more opportunities or to evaluate various risks related to investment avenues. It is the only prudent for an investor to do a detailed analysis as is possible without taking such shortcuts. It is important to avoid behavioral biases in investment decisions. To detach emotions from investments, it is better to take the opinion of a third person, that is, the registered investment advisor RIA or a mutual fund distributor MFD. Definitely, there are various risks associated in the investments. So, the risk profiler should ascertain the risk appetite of the investor so that one does not sell the mutual fund schemes that carry a higher risk than what the investor can handle. This is risk profiling. In order to ascertain the risk appetite, the following must be evaluated: the need to take risk, the ability to take risk, and the willingness to take risk. Out of the three, the need to take risk arises when the investor needs higher returns to reach one's goals. The ability to take risk refers to the financial ability and the investment horizon, whereas the willingness is linked to the psychological capacity to handle risk. The distributor has to evaluate these three and strike a balance between them whenever there is a conflict. Whenever the NFO is launched, it is compulsory to mention the risk in the form of riskometer. So, accordingly, the person can decide to invest in the different NFOs and mutual funds. Considering the risk profile of a particular individual, the assets should be allocated into the various sectors and investments. What is asset allocation? Understanding asset allocation. The basic meaning of asset allocation is to allocate an investor's money across asset categories in order to achieve some objective. First, it is a process which always involves several steps, and those steps should not be ignored or skipped. Second, the whole idea behind asset allocation is to achieve some objective. Whichever approach one selects, one must go through the steps of the process in order to achieve the objective. There are two popular approaches of asset allocation: strategic asset allocation and tactical asset allocation. Let us talk about strategic asset allocation. It is the allocation aligned to the financial goals of the individual. An investor may select any of the asset allocation approaches. However, there may be a need to make modifications in the asset allocations. This is rebalancing. Let us take an example. Assume that the target asset allocation for an investor is 50-50 between asset categories A and B. A year later, the asset category A went up by 20%, whereas asset B went down by 5%. In such a case, the allocation has deviated from the target. If we started investment of ₹1,000 in both the cases, the value in both the cases would stand at ₹1,200 in asset A and ₹950 in asset B, with the total portfolio value at ₹2,150. The current allocation stands at 55.81% in asset A and 44.19% in asset B. This needs to be restored to 50-50. That means selling some part of the investment in asset A worth ₹125 and buying some in asset B. As we can see here, the asset A which has gone up is sold and the asset B which has gone down is bought. This happens automatically without the investor having to take a view on the direction of the markets. The rebalancing approach can work very well over the years when the various asset categories go through many market cycles of ups and downs. Rebalancing is required in case of strategic asset allocation as well as tactical asset allocation. SEBI has provided the timelines for rebalancing of schemes. It has mandated rebalancing periods for all schemes other than index funds and exchange traded funds is 30 business days. However, the mandated rebalancing period is not applicable to the overnight funds. Now, with this, we are concluding the chapter number 1. Let us do the MCQs. If you have any doubt, you can put in the comment box. Try to solve the MCQs on your own at the end of every chapter. Question number 1. Which one of this is not a factor to evaluate investments? A. Reachability, B. Safety, C. Liquidity, and D. Returns. And the correct answer is reachability. Question number 2. Shyam blindly invests in the same scheme in which his friends and relatives invested. Which bias Shyam is exhibiting? A. Loss aversion. B. Confidence bias. C. Herd mentality. And D. Confirmation bias. And the correct answer is C. Herd mentality. Question number 3. Which one of this is not an asset class? A. Stock equity. B. Real estate. C. Mutual fund. And D. Commodities. And the correct answer is C. Mutual funds. Question number 4. Prices of long duration debt securities will decline with interest rates. A. Goes up. B. No relation between price and intraday rate. C. Remains unchanged. And D. False. And the correct answer is A. Goes up. Question number 5. Choose the correct type of asset allocation. A. Heuristic, confirmation and familiarity. B. Strategic, tactical and dynamic. C. Diversification, rebalancing and strategic. D. Credit, inflation and price. And the correct answer is B. Strategic, tactical and dynamic. Question number 6. The three basic aspects to ascertain risk appetite of an investor are A. Need, ability and source of income. B. Market conditions, source of income and willingness to save. C. Market conditions, source of income and ability to save. And D. Need, ability and willingness to take a risk. And the correct answer is need, ability and willingness to take the risk. Question number 7. Select one that is not the type of investment risk. A. Inflation risk. B. Cyber risk. C. Market risk. And D. Credit risk. And the correct answer is cyber risk. Question number 8. Asset allocation which maintains the constant ratio by rebalancing portfolio is A. Fixed asset allocation. B. Dynamic asset allocation. C. Flexible asset allocation. D. Variable asset allocation. And the correct answer is A. Fixed asset allocation. Question number 9. Which one of the following statement perfectly defines loss aversion? A. A bear market resulting to investors' loss. B. The ability to take high risk for profitability. C. One's tendency to prefer avoiding losses. And D. One who invests only in equity market. And the correct answer is C. One's tendency to prefer avoiding losses. Question number 10. What is the real rate of return? A. Return that investors get after adjusting the risk. B. Returns that investor get after adjusting inflation. C. Returns that investor gets after taxes. And D. Returns that investor gets after payment of all expenses. And the correct answer is B. Returns that investor get after adjusting inflation. Question number 11. Which of the following is called physical asset? A. Gold. B. Gold ETF. C. Gold fund. D. Gold bond. And the correct answer is A. Gold. Question number 12. Real return to an investor investing in government securities represents A. Capital gain received on sale of security. B. Returns as per interest rate specified in the security. C. Interest received in adjusted to taxation. And D. Return adjusted to inflation. And the correct answer is D. Return adjusted to inflation. Question number 13. From the following, identify the investments which can get only capital gains and no income. A. Gold. B. Mutual fund. C. Government securities. And D. Fixed deposits. And the correct answer is A. Gold. Question number 14. The purchasing power of the currency changes on account of which of the following? A. Asset allocation. B. Inflation. C. Compound interest. D. Diversification. And the correct answer is B. Inflation.